Hi everyone, Ekthany Site Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it is time for a review of the new Matmos record, Plastic Anniversary. Formed in 1994, the musical duo known as Matmos has always consisted of Drew Daniel and Martin Schmidt, and while not always appreciated for it, the duo over the years has built up one of the weirdest and most eclectic discographies in electronic music. Between collaborations with people like us, as well as So Percussion, strange concept albums that do things like try to find the common ground between American and medieval folk music, sampling various kinds of surgery, also their last full-length album over here, which I loved, which sampled a washing machine, specifically their washing machine, as well as also not sampling anything at all, like the entirely synthesized Supreme Balloon. Matmos' discography covers a pretty wide range of left-field bases, from IDM and glitch, plunderphonic, sound collage, folktronica, musique concrète, but if you could the duo's sound to anything, it's their incredibly unique approach to sampling and sound manipulation, and pairing almost each album of theirs up with a pretty interesting concept. And Plastic Anniversary is no exception to that rule. Essentially, this album revolves around the very heavy sampling of plastics. Plastic. It is all around us, it saves lives, it fills our oceans, it's destroying our environment, and it's literally a part of every step of the process of me getting my reviews done too. So why not make an album based around it as well? Now, like usual with Matmos, some of the source material for the samples on these tracks is pretty obvious. They even go as far as to hint toward it in the titles, like the persistent sounds of billiard balls clacking together on the track Billiard Balls and Synthetic Fat. The sharp plastic smack of those billiard balls on this track provides for some very sharp and prickly percussive bits as the duo essentially progresses on this track through a very strange and mysterious piece of IDM. Then there's also Thermoplastic Riot Shield, whose percussive sections sound like they are lifted from the sound of smacking a thermoplastic riot shield. And then there are instances of sampling on this record that are a little less obvious, like on the opening track, Breaking Bread, which according to a Thrill Jockey press release, I saw actually consists of the sound of breaking records, specifically from the band Bread. So breaking records by a band named Bread, Breaking Bread, which is honestly the most novel way of sampling a record I think I've heard in a long time. I could list off every weird sampling idea implemented throughout this album, but honestly, Matmos' importance is based less on that and more on their ability to manipulate these sounds into actually compelling and enjoyable musical compositions. Again, to go back to the opening track, Breaking Bread, it is a fun and thrilling and funky opener, loaded with these squeaky and grunty bits of rhythm and bass. Even though it's a relatively short track, it's still packed with quite a few shifts and segues and passages. Sounds like the most danceable thing that you could potentially get out of like an experimental chemical lab where you lock a bunch of mad scientists in it. And this is essentially what they concoct. The song The Crying Pill is interestingly titled, considering that it is packed with these descending, wailing tones that sound like just blood dripping down a wall in the middle of like a horror movie trailer. The eerie tension of this track is built up even further with these orchestral-sized hits of percussion. Also some really bold arpeggios too. This is maybe one of the most cinematic tracks of the entire record. And oddly enough, the chemically synthesized silicone gel implant has some melodic and rhythmic grooves that kind of remind me of bits from the duo Supreme Balloon album, which is not necessarily a bad thing given that is one of my favorite Matmos records, period. And also, even if there's a touch of compositional overlap between this track and that record, this song does have a pretty different sound palette, much more prickly and plucky, essentially sounding like the duo is trying to soundtrack the hustle and bustle of a microscopic city or a colony of ants going about doing what they do. The classical influences on this record fade back in on the title track. Sounds like some really beautiful, triumphant horn sections, colored with these sputtering alien wails and tones and quick bits of percussion. Just a very strange sound palette organized for a very uplifting purpose. We get a pretty nice contrast on the next track, Thermoplastic Riot Shield, which has these heavy, crushing, almost industrial hits of percussion and noise. Definitely one of the wildest things that Matmos have ever delivered in their entire discography. Meanwhile, there's kind of a shift in tone on Fanfare for Polyethylene, Waste Containers, and Collapse of the Fourth Kingdom, where both have this very rhythmic and primal quality to them, almost like I'm listening to a drum circle or a drum line. It's like the flow of the album is bringing us to a point where we've reached the death of society and now we're suffering through a plastic dystopia, which has brought us back to a state of tribalism or something. And the album gets even more rudimentary and I guess primordial on the closing track, Plastisphere, which is essentially a sound collage and an ambient piece where all of these plastic samples are culminated to create the sound of like a beach. The waves whooshing, the wind blowing, birds calling. It sounds like that, but it's not that, because it sounds like instead of birds, you're hearing like plastic squeaks. Maybe you're hearing like plastic bags rustling instead of the water. But it's all been heavily manipulated to the point where it sounds eerily similar to the seashore. Like it's instantly recognizable. If you're not listening closely enough, you might just think it's the sound of the ocean. It is the sound of nature being recreated with something very unnatural, all of it being filtered through this really cool, complete, and thoughtful concept that the duo has created. Now, there were a few tracks that I found to be a little underwhelming, or maybe the flow wasn't quite as seamless or as on the edge of my seat as I would have hoped. For example, the song Singing Tube was maybe not the most novel in the bunch, in my opinion. Matmos are certainly not the first artists out there to create a singing tube of some sort, and I'm not sure if their application of it on this album is the most novel that I've ever heard, though I do like the way that they've kind of manipulated it to almost sound like a guitar at some points, a guitar being strummed. Still though, thought this was a really great album and I absolutely loved it. Really intriguing, unique, fun, and totally weird. And it's absolutely amazing that Matmos have been able to keep their creative energies up and keep them cutting edge so far into their career. I'm feeling a decent to a strong 8 on this thing. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best. You're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Matmos, Plastic Anniversary, forever.